Yes, sir.
I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I know it's kind of a nasty day, but we're here now, and I'm here to talk about Hedy Lamarr. And tonight, it's for Anthony. First of all, before I begin talking about the book, I do want to say a few things about why I do what I do. And I see a lot of familiar faces here. I'm really thrilled you guys are here. I'm a film biographer, and motion picture is undoubtedly America's one true art form. And several years ago I had the opportunity to speak at Brandeis University, and that particular year they were giving a special honor to actress Margaret O'Brien. And she and I brainstormed about what we were going to tell, what we were going to talk about and tell these young film students about their art and their craft. And it's so very important that they know what came before them and who gave them the opportunity to do what they want to do. Motion picture, of course, has created our culture, has created our society, and they say that a society, a civilization, a culture, without art, it ceases to exist. So I'm very honored and privileged that I have the opportunity to research and study and talk about an aspect of life that I thoroughly enjoy. And when I did my Patricia Neal book, one of the first people that I interviewed was Robert Osborne. And Bob Osborne has become a friend, and one of the most important things he told me as a biographer is you have to tell a story. You can dig up all the research you want, write a telephone book, but it could be very boring, so you have to do a narrative, you have to write a story, and you have to educate the young people who are reading that story about the person that you're writing about. I was very fortunate to have my friend Patricia Neal, the late Patricia Neal, be the subject of my first book. And through her, opportunities opened, and I was able to research in archives around the world. And to me, she was my muse. She gave me the wherewithal to do other books, and of course, Beautiful, The Life of Hedy Lamarr is my new book. When I was very young, in the late 1950s and the 1960s, motion pictures were being rediscovered, and the value to our cultures, the value of these motion pictures were being readdressed. And by the end of the 1960s and in the early 1970s, there was a great nostalgia boom of motion pictures. Everybody was coming out with a films of book. And so I kind of thought that would last forever, but it didn't. But things come in waves, and it's most likely going to come about again when some of these celebrities who are quickly leaving us are going to have the opportunity for their careers to be looked at and reevaluated. Patricia Neal and Hedy Lamarr both, to me, they were actresses whose careers needed to be readdressed. They were Patricia Neal. I'm not going to talk about Patricia Neal at length, but certainly somebody asked me at one point, why would Patricia Neal give you, a first-time writer, the opportunity to write about her? And it was a fairly simple answer. Nobody else had asked her. And that totally baffled me because she was a great lady of film and television. With Hedy Lamarr, her career ended primarily in the 1950s, and so for several generations she was unknown until the 1970s, when Mel Brooks, not maliciously, but Mel Brooks named his character, played by Harvey Korman, Hedy Lamarr. So, wrongly or rightly, Hedy became almost a joke, and that didn't settle well with her, I understand, and there are people that know that. That didn't settle well with her, and it was unjust, because when I began my research on Hedy, Her reviews, like Patricia Neal's, were more often than not extremely positive. Some of the films were bombs, but her work, Hedy Lamarr's work, and Patricia's as well, was always well reviewed. At any rate, why I wrote Patricia Neal was basically to chronicle her career and to ask the reader to please reevaluate her output. With Hedy Lamarr, I started my work on Hedy Lamarr a few years back, and after I contracted with my publisher, I got a phone call from a notable film director who at that time had a troubled script about Hedy Lamarr, and the director asked me, "Have you found a voice for Hedy Lamarr?" And of course I said, "Oh yes, I have found a voice for Hedy Lamarr." And I knew I had found one for Patricia Neal, but as I began my research at USC and UCLA and the Performing Arts Library over here, first three places I always hit, when I began my research, I was a little troubled because Hedy's life wasn't as well. There were times when her life was very troubled, and I thought, well, what am I getting into here? So as I worked through my manuscript, I found moments where I thought I heard her talking to me. And as I was finishing up my manuscript in May of last year, I was also faced with losing my father. And so I more or less kicked into an emotional level, which can be good and sometimes cannot be good. But things started clicking, and I finally realized, of course, I had told the story, at least to myself, I had told the story and I had found what I wanted to say, and then I heard Hedy's voice. And I had the great opportunity to talk with several of her very close intimates and also with her children. And by talking with people who knew Hedy and people who knew the good, the bad, and the indifferent, I was able to weigh a lot of truths and myths about Hedy Lamarr into what has become her story. One important thing about Hedy's life was she led a fascinating existence in Europe before she ever came to America in 1937. The Hollywood, the MGM, the Louis B. Mayer myth that she escaped her husband and Louis B. Mayer saved her and they sailed over on the Normandy and she came to America and he gave her a contract and out of nowhere she became a film star is not necessarily true. She had done several films in Europe prior to the Ecstasy, the film which was very notorious here in the United States due to prurient 1930s views of nudity. It caused not a ripple over in Europe, and but she did live a life of wealth and a life of, I can't say real security, because as a young Jewish woman married to a Jewish man who was an honorary Aryan because he was working both sides of the fence, it was a very trepidous and a very dangerous time for her to be in Europe. So I wrote at length some amazing pieces of information. I don't think Denise and Anthony even knew about their mother. Certainly not any information that had been written about before. And to me, there's a story, a separate book right there about Hedy Keisler in Europe before her escape on the Normandy to Hollywood in 1937. It's a fascinating story, and she was deep into the intrigue of the political machine, of the growth of fascism and bigotry in Europe during that explosive period of the 1930s. Her husband was Fritz Mendel, who was the third richest man in Austria, and he was providing munitions to both Adolf Hitler and to Mussolini. One thing I did want to dispel is the myth that Hedy Lamarr knew Adolf Hitler. Neither Hedy Lamarr nor Fritz Mendel were ever introduced to Adolf Hitler. That just would not have happened. but they certainly knew Mussolini. Hedy Lamarr did leave her husband in 1937. She came to the United States, and yes, she did sign a contract with Louis B. Mayer, and he was totally infatuated with her.